3 minutes,
No.
but I guess we can,
No,
that doesn't matter.
How many participants do we expect?
Well, we had anything between 10 and 79. So we'll see.
Okay.
When was the 79?
The very first one. Yeah, that was really a lot.
Oh, here come the attendees. I see the list. It's starting.
Okay.
So here comes.
Yeah, the participants.
So should we mute ourselves when we're not talking, or is it okay because it's just so few?
I think it's fine for the,
Of us.
since we got just a couple of panelists.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be, unless there's like a crazy noise in the background, like a screaming child.
Okay. Well,
We've got a studio Katze somewhere around here.
Okay.
Where do you, Doug, where do you work now, actually?
I'm still in Chesterfield. I'm at a middle school. I'm at Bailey Bridge now.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good,
So in Donea.
good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. Did you get to do anything with the Governor's Academy this past year?
No, because of the COVID situation, I went to Germany, and now I'm located in New York. So I'm losing my close relationship to the DOE in Virginia now.
I see, I see. Well, let this be a first step in coming back and reestablishing professional relationships.
Do you know each other from the Governor's Academy?
And a few other places as well.
Oh, nice.
Helmut pops up anywhere there's some good German experiences going on.
Oh, of course. Now we have to have.
Okay, here we go. Now people are showing up. We'll just wait a little bit longer.
So hello, everyone. Welcome.
Oh, I see Alexandra is here.
Yay, Alexandra.
Our former
Yay.
student Alexandra.
Mhm.
Hello, Alexandra. Alexandra, where are you? Are you in Switzerland?
Ooh,
She can write in the chat.
okay.
Bonjour, Grace.
So welcome, everyone. My name is Marcel Rotter. I'm an associate professor at the University of Mary Washington. I'm just the technical housekeeper here. And after these few announcements, I will disappear with my camera. Just announcement that we should write our questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat. The chat should be there just for chatting right now and for technical problems if there are any. Please put them there. Otherwise, put your questions in the Q&A box. You can also upvote questions. So if you find out you have the same question as someone else, you can just upvote that and then it will go up in the lineup of questions. Okay, so wunderbar. So many of you probably know that already. That's kind of standard procedure in webinars. So I will mute my phone and camera and take over my colleague, Jennifer Hansen-Glucklich.
Thank you, Marcel. So I'm just going to wait 1 second because there's a bunch of new people pouring in right now, and I want to just give it 1 second. I'm happy to see lots of our students from Mary Washington are attending. That's wonderful. Also some former students, which is also very exciting. Okay, great. So I think we can get started. So first of all, welcome everyone to today's meeting of the new normal, Germany and the US now. a Ringvorlesung organized by the Collaboratory for German Studies in Virginia. My name is Jennifer Hansen-Glucklich, and I teach German at the University of Mary Washington. So just a few words about the Collaboratory. The Collaboratory was initiated by Marcel Rotter at the University of Mary Washington. And this is a partnership among German programs of the University of Mary Washington, the University of Virginia, the Virginia Commonwealth University, Virginia Tech, and William and Mary. And we strive to promote interest in the language and cultures of the German-speaking countries for students, faculty, and the broader community throughout and beyond the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I would also like to thank, in addition to the Collaboratory, William and Mary in particular for co-sponsoring this panel. And it's nice to see that some of the members of the Collaboratory are also here for today's panel. So our topic for today is access to education, homeschooling, and higher ed. And I'm very happy to now introduce our three panelists. Helmut Kehlenbeck, Selma Erdogdu-Volmerich, and Douglas Tibbett. Great, so I'm going to start with Helmut. So Helmut Kehlenbeck is based in New York right now. He holds degrees in German and special education. He is currently working as German language advisor at the Central Agency for Schools Abroad, die Zentralstelle für das Auslandsschulwesen. Previously, among many other positions, Helmut has also taught German as a second language. He has worked as a school principal and as superintendent of schools in Bremen. He's also worked with refugee students, with newly arrived students, and students with migration background in a variety of roles, including as project manager for the scholarship program START, and as project manager for the implementation of German language certificates for new students. Our second panelist is Selma Erdogdu-Volmerich. Selma lives in Dortmund, Germany. She has a PhD in Germanic languages and literatures from the University of Virginia, an MA in German from the University of South Carolina, and an MA in American Studies from the Ruhr-Universität Bochum. Selma is currently Fachbereichsleiterin, which is like department head, at the Volkshochschule Witten-Wetter-Herdecke, which you can see in the background of her screen there, where she is responsible for the lectures and classes in society, politics and culture, English, professional training, and media. Selma plans the curriculum in these areas and is a contact person for both teachers and students. I also want to mention that Selma is also a mother to two school-age children, an 11-year-old sixth grader and a 7-year-old daughter who just started elementary school this last year. And so she has thus had her own fair share of homeschooling experiences over this past year, and she can tell us a little bit about that from a sort of first-person perspective. Our third panelist is Douglas Tibbett. He is a Richmond native and German teacher, currently teaching middle school. He holds a bachelor's degree in German studies and a master's in curriculum and instruction, both from William and Mary. He has taught grades 6 through 12 and has held positions in Spotsylvania, Henrico, and Chesterfield, sometimes concurrently. Most summers, he also teaches a German detective fiction course at the Governor's German Academy, which sounds like a lot of fun. Wish I could take it. It sounds like a great class. Okay, so how we're going to do this is I'm going to start off with a question to each panelist, but really this should be more of a conversation. So I want everyone to feel free to jump in and add to the conversation. It doesn't have to be like an interview where we go from panelist to panelist. So I'm going to start with a question for Helmut. And the first question is sort of a broad question. Could you tell us a little bit about the situation in Germany now? What students in Germany are particularly vulnerable and at risk right now due to the homeschooling and lack of access to regular forms of education?
Thank you, Jennifer, for introducing me. And first I want to apologize for my sometimes quite weak English, because I'm living in a German-speaking bubble in the US for more than 3 years. And I have a typical migrant situation, always being this in my mother tongue. Yeah, the German schools are trying to start or to start schools, normal regular schools again, and that's a very important issue. I have been working in Bremen for several years, and what I know about Bremen is that all primary students are allowed to attend classes now, and only the high schoolers some schools is organized in a hybrid model or in a remote model, because we know that the most vulnerable students are the ones who don't have the equipment for following the classes. So it is mainly poor students or maybe newly arrived students without German language knowledge, and so that's a big challenge for them. But the intention is that most schools are back to normal. I don't know, Selma, how the situation is in your state. Is it different?
Well, right now, like I think all of the classes, and this is in North Rhine-Westphalia, so it's also tricky because that always depends on the state as well, on the federal state. But my kids both don't go to school, to in-person school this week, but they will most likely start again next week. But then it's going to be a sort of, it's called a Wechselmodell. So they're going to be going to school pretty much every other day. Yeah, it's a very dynamic situation because basically it depends on how the number of COVID cases is going to develop. Once we are above a certain threshold, then they can't go any longer.
And I just read an article today from Bremen, and it said that students nearly missed one whole year because of the pandemic situation, not because of quarantine times and hybrid levels. So but from what I experienced, that's quite similar to the U.S. situation in the U.S. So I have been talking to a lot of students during the last weeks. There's a German because of the German oral exams, and most of the students, they attend high schools, and nearly everyone told me they haven't been to school in person for more than a year now. So and that's a situation which is different to the German situation. So yeah, but yeah.
Which students, Helmut, do you think are particularly vulnerable? So like, which ones do you think are at most risk right now?
So school is not only a place of learning, so it's also a place of living. So, and if you living in poor conditions, maybe with 10 persons in a 3-room apartment, and maybe only 2 of them have a smartphone or a computer, or maybe they're with a weak Wi-Fi. That's one of the big challenges. Or maybe you are students newly arrived from Syria or Poland or Romania and you live in a not German-speaking environment. How do you learn your language? It's quite impossible. And school is offering a learning place, and also indeed a place of meeting peers and having conversations and having good time with others. So the school is much more, and students miss the good meals at the schools at lunchtime. So, for example, in Bremen, students living in poor condition have a free lunch at school, or sometimes a free breakfast, and everything is. And and we have families where children grow up in abusive situations, and that's these groups, from my point of view, are the most students with the most challenges. And you have school students with low grades in schools and who don't like school too much, and so and they break away from school. That's my point of view.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Do you, Douglas or Selma, do you want to comment about that before we go on?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I think it's becoming increasingly unfair because those students who were disadvantaged before the pandemic are now also the ones that are suffering more and more because they get less support a lot of times from less support and helps with getting homeschooled at home because maybe their parents just aren't able to support them in the same way as other people can. So
yeah, that's a good point.
I hear a lot about how this past year has done lots to just kind of widen the gap between students who are already privileged and achieving and whose school systems can truly fund their education, both with manpower and with money. So it's a lot of the same kind of situation here. We, like Helmut was saying, here in America, we also have a lot of students who are relying on schools for other resources, not only just the socialization, but also meals particularly. I know that was a huge, when we closed down last year, that was a huge concern. How are people going to get fed? How are they going to get their children fed? And that was like one of those first day things that we had to kind of attack. Or I should say school systems. I didn't really have a hand in planning that. But.
Right. Actually, that leads me into the question I wanted to ask Selma next. Selma works at a different kind of school, a Volkshochschule, which for some of our audience, they might not be familiar with this term because it's kind of a uniquely German concept. So I guess maybe Selma, maybe you could tell us a little bit the challenges your students have been facing since classes went online. What's lost due to the online format? Are there any positive aspects? And maybe before you do that, you could just briefly tell us what Volkshochschulen are and what kind of populations they serve.
Yeah, so the literal translation of Volkshochschule would be that it's a university for the people. A Volkshochschule, or short VHS, as you can see in my logo up there, it's open to everybody. Regardless of age, gender, cultural, religious background. And there are generally no formal requirements for admission. So you don't have to have a school degree in order to participate in classes. A lot of the classes we offer are also not geared towards sort of getting a certain degree, but people just do them sort of for their personal or professional further education. Our students are generally or primarily adults, even though we also have classes for kids. And we offer classes in a really broad variety of areas that starts with politics and culture to language classes. We also have yoga classes and classes in many different languages, from Arabic to Japanese and Swedish. So it's a very broad range of topics. Continuing education in Germany is a mandatory task for the individual federal states. And what's important is that a cornerstone of this is really political education. So that's a very integral, can I say integral? Part of our work. A cornerstone, so to speak. Volkshochschulen are publicly funded. And this also means that classes are generally speaking quite affordable, or at times even free. And also if people are, for example, in a difficult financial situation, they might pay less for the same class. Yeah, my VHS is called Witten-Wetter-Herdecke, as you can see in the logo again, because these are the three cities or towns that we primarily serve, or whose population we're primarily serving. Yeah, there are also, however, other things that Volkshochschulen do. One would be that was very important over the last couple of years, was that we are Volkshochschulen are also offering German as a foreign language classes for refugees, and also students or people can who don't have a high school or school degree can enroll in a program and then get a school degree from the VHS. So it's a very diverse
right. So the
situation.
consequences then for students like refugees, for example, who need these classes to learn their language, what are the consequences for them? What has that been like over the past year for these kinds of students?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult because I mean, we've been going back and forth on an in-classroom teaching because the situation as to what classes are allowed to take place and which are not are different depending on the field. So there's no sort of one size fits all answer for that, but it's of course difficult because we have sort of online tutorials and things like that, but it's not the same situation as being in a classroom together.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Douglas, you teach in another a different kind of school, right? So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your experiences have been like over the past year. Maybe just walk us through like a typical day for students and teachers in public schools in the U.S. right now, and also tell us, you know, who's in charge, who's been making the decisions regarding opening and closing, who makes the decisions, what is safe?
Right. So I work in a public middle school in Chesterfield County, so that's in the area of Richmond. And I should really give a disclaimer that like everything that I'm going to talk about from personal experience is witnessed from a county that has resources. So this is all stuff that a place that has some property taxes that are really pumping into the school system. It's what those places are capable of. Obviously, there are a lot of places in our area that are going through things differently and for a variety of different reasons. But where we're at, it's been interesting because it's fluctuated throughout the year. And I'll start with the kind of in charge piece because it really affects how your school system looks that we kind of haven't had the most continuity from leaders, from experts in like the education community in the United States. I know that a lot of different decisions have been passed from like the federal level down to the state level and then down even to the local level. And it's just it depends on who's picking up what tasks at different times. I know that for a long time, my county was waiting to hear things from the governor, and our school board was kind of having to make, I know one person decried having to make public health decisions as an education a public official, which is quite an interesting thing. They had to vote on whether or not we were going to come back remote, and that decision was made pretty late into the summer. Other places in our area were able to make their own decisions and things, and that results in a household like mine where I started the year remote, but my wife, who works in a different county, is in person every single day, which is kind of an interesting flip when you're thinking about we're both trying to get to the same end to like kind of contain a virus, but you have a household that kind of has to straddle these two places and is putting itself at the risk of the one that is making the least safe decisions on things health-wise. Richmond schools in this area also, I mean, they at the beginning of the year stated that they were all virtual all year. And that has held until, actually, I think this week Richmond went back or was projected to. In person. I think they're allowing 800 students to come back to Richmond Public Schools. We came back last March to full in person, but there were people that were, of course, teaching from the building, and we have special education services going on. So if we're talking about a typical day right now, we have an elective virtual pseudo hybrid model. We tried a hybrid model in November, and it was a struggle. It was that situation that Selma was discussing with your children going to school every other day. We had Monday and Tuesday. So you had a Monday group, a Tuesday group. And then on Thursday, your Monday group went. And on Friday, your Tuesday group went. And then Wednesdays was an asynchronous day. So we would send out work for them to complete on their own, which is a whole another thing, is talking about passing the buck on student responsibility for work. Where does that land? Does it land on families? Things like that. Typical school day is that Our in-person kids show up. I have a taped off section of my desk. Everyone is spaced out. And equity is a huge thing that everyone has had to discuss lately for teachers and administrators and students alike. We have to provide an equitable education to all of our students. We're a public institution. So it's interesting having to straddle that line. A lot of teachers I know have had to double their workloads because they are teaching 2 people online while at the same time managing a physical space, which if I were to hear somebody call me from the kitchen right now, I would be a little disoriented because I'm focusing so much on this screen in front of me and this audience in front of me, and then wheel around and I, do normal classroom management things with students. So teachers are pretty exhausted by those things, but students are as well. They have a lot of new rules they have to deal with. And it's emotional seeing all these friends, but it's also emotional not being able to interact with them in a old normal way. Am I able to coin that here?
Doug, that still strikes me are the differences between the schools and the counties in the US. For example, yeah. I've been living in Richmond, Virginia, as you know, and I know your county, and all your schools in your county are in a quite good shape. So, and in a lot of schools, students have a personal laptop or an iPad, or you have a perfect condition for teaching on a remote level. And you have schools fully with fully in-person classes and others fully remote. And Selma, I think we also have these differences between schools in Germany and the different rules from state to state, but the differences are not as big as I experienced them in the US. Yeah. During the last half year, 6 months, I've been teaching at the United Nations International School. It's an expensive private school, and there we had everything. So screens, personal laptops, and a concept with vaccination tests and vaccination for the teachers. And you have public schools in a completely different situation.
Yeah, it's
I will also say, oh, pardon me.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I will also say that the counties that I have spoken about so far, Richmond County, Chesterfield County, the county in which my wife works, all have extremely different approaches to opening up. And they literally border each other. I could drive into the next one in 10 minutes.
I'm curious, do students get tested for COVID at school in the States at all? Because we have that, I mean, now we can only have sort of traditional classroom teaching if schools carry out 2 tests a week, or rather the students are supposed to take to test themselves under supervision. And it's a whole, obviously a whole debate going on about that.
Certainly, and we're having a similar debate here. Well, not exactly a debate. I'd say, well, here's our system. We are supposed to take, as teachers, and technically students should also be doing this, a teacher and student health assessment, which asks if you have certain symptoms. There's nothing to say. I think the only true measurement there is to talk about temperature, which we have, I believe, found there is not. I mean, you can be asymptomatic, and so it's not exactly. It's not 100% for sure. It's basically a piece of paper that says, I'm not going to come to school if I'm sick, if I know that I'm sick. And it's Scout's honor on that one.
And the difference, Selma, is the vaccination for teachers, for example. In Germany, I only know some primary teachers who have been vaccinated for the first, who got their first shot. And in New York, since mid of January, every teacher was eligible for having the vaccination, and most of them are fully vaccinated now. So every student up 60 and older is eligible for the vaccine. So, and that's a very huge difference.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of something that both Helmut and Selma have mentioned, which is this idea about how uneven, well, Douglas mentioned it too, this gap, right? This sort of the difference between privileged and underprivileged students, right? The fact that certain students don't have access to technology, they don't have parental support at home. So I was thinking maybe we could talk a little bit about the differences in Germany and the US in terms of poverty and education. And is there a difference in poverty in Germany and the US in the way that it affects education? And I know that everybody here has experience both in Germany and the US, so it's kind of nice. We all have that perspective. So I don't know whoever wants to begin, but just sort of in general about this topic.
Yes, the experience of poverty between the US and Germany is different, because but I give you a number, maybe around 20% of the population among the students is living in poor conditions. Poor conditions means the family has less than 60% of the average income in Germany. So that's the average for Germany. And you have maybe, for example, if we take the state Bremen has a rate of 35 students in some schools. More than 80% of the students are eligible for free meals at lunch and social living on welfare. But the difference is nearly every student has a health insurance, because every family has a health insurance. I only know some families living in difficult living situation because of not finding apartments and so on. And I'm still sometimes shocked about the deep poverty in the US when I travel around, when I go to schools, when I talk to students. That strikes me a lot, and it's harder to compare to the German situation. The German situation is challenging, but not as much as in the US. So, for example, the estimate is that nearly 10,000 students in New York City don't have an apartment to live. So, and that's a situation which is different to the situation in Germany. But still, the people are struggling hard, from my point of view.
Well, I think it's different kind of poverty, maybe.
Yeah.
It manifests itself differently. Yeah.
I don't see a lot of, just based on where I live, I don't see a lot of New York level, like urban poverty. It doesn't look the same where I'm at. It's definitely still there, and it's definitely still a huge issue, and especially when it comes to this. A lot of the differences that I see between counties, one of the reasons, and also one of the real like hiccups in allowing counties to make these decisions about how they're going to open, which students are allowed back, what the building is going to look like, how students are going to access their work, their education. Do we hold deadlines the same way for students who have to do asynchronous work? So many of those decisions need to be left up to the county because of funding. And, Helmut, you said my county is 1-to-1 on Chromebooks, 1 Chromebook, 1 student. And we were, even before COVID occurred, that was something that we had in our county going for us, that we were able to just pivot on. We already had software kind of like in the background setting up for if we were to do digital classrooms without, say, Google Classroom or another free service. A lot of the county in which my wife teaches is more like, you see a lot of rural poverty at work. And so the problems that are associated with that are, how is my child going to be fed if they are fed through school? We can't close schools if students are relying on that for meals and for not all students can get transportation to school to get the meals if they are getting meals from school, and parents in those cases don't have the job flexibility in order to watch over their kids, get childcare. School is childcare for so many people here. So there are a lot of struggles, just way more struggles for students who are underprivileged and families that are struggling with this.
I wonder too, I mean, I know here in the United States, there's been a lot of articles in the paper showing mothers and fathers driving their children to, like fast food restaurants or Panera or McDonald's and parking in the parking lot so that students have access to internet, right? So that they can do their school. What is it like in Germany? I mean, Helmut and Selma, is there a comparable situation? Is there more access? Is there easier access to internet? Is it more of a problem of not having the devices? Or is it actually not having the internet connection like it is here, in addition to not having devices?
I can actually, oh, sorry. Go ahead, because I can only speculate. So you go ahead.
I think I've never seen these pictures from Germany, but you can say that, like I found an OECD study that says that German schools are 10 years behind of the digital development. So because of different reasons. One reason is the political situation, and most states in Germany missed during the last decades to improve the Wi-Fi situation, the equipment for teachers and the teacher training. And so when I do my teacher trainings here in the US, every teacher knows everything about using Google, using Zoom, using Hangout and apps, and they have a very profound competence in working with digital devices and so on, and that's still quite different to Germany. And one other reason is very strict personal data restrictions. So teachers are not allowed to work with Microsoft products in classes, or teachers are not allowed to work with Google Classroom. Teachers are not allowed to work with Zoom because of so the possibilities for teachers using all these wonderful stuff is not as good as in the US, and the competences are much better.
There is pardon me, go ahead.
For example, but I think the standard in family with technical equipment, with smartphones and laptops and so on, is quite similar to the US. Yeah.
I'd say that technology piece is something that I was not aware of internationally and have absolutely taken for granted as an educator in the United States. If we have had a few days of being hybrid or in-person / asynchronous. I don't know why we don't call it hybrid. I think it got a bad rap back in November. But if Google goes down, and it has across the day out, like it is, we have to push everything back. It's that equity piece again. If I have people that are expecting to jump in through Google Meet, I have to prepare something completely new to give them if I can't give them the live lesson. Of course, we can do recordings and things like that, but here I am recording in my classroom to a computer, and then my audience is off to my left, so that content is not going to be exactly the same.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, sorry. I was going to bring you in, so go ahead. You're good.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to agree that I think a lot of the schools in Germany were really lacking the necessary technological infrastructure. It either didn't exist, or also people didn't know how to use it. And I think that both teachers and students often had little or no experience, for example, with using digital learning platforms or other online tools that existed. And then at the same time, there was the problem that these learning platforms were never designed for a situation like that. They were always kind of meant to be supplementary. And I think Well, I mean, definitely students, there are different levels of sort of technological equipment that's available at home. And I think while maybe most families might have a smartphone or a tablet, in order to sort of follow the distance learning, the distant learning, you'd also have to have a printer to be able to print out handouts. And I think that's something, for example, that a lot of families didn't have, because it's just not sort of an everyday household item. And I think it's not only about having the technology available or owning it, but about knowing how to use it and about getting assistance at home. And that's, I think, what varies very much with regard to sort of financial and educational background.
Yeah, and every crisis is also an opportunity. So, so what I experience now from Germany is there's a very good improvement with digital devices and Wi-Fi's in school and so on. It's a little bit too late, but it is. And so, and that reminds me a little bit of my situation when 5 years ago with the integration of 100,000 of newly arrived students. So it has been a crisis and a challenge for the schools to integrate so many students, but it also has been an opportunity because it has been in the political focus, and suddenly there was enough funding for support teachers, for classes for German as a second language and so on. So every crisis has something in it, and it hopes the improvement will last. But I think the best way and the only way is to return to normal schools as soon as possible.
I definitely agree with you in the sense that this crisis has kind of really born quite a bit of opportunity. I mean, here we are in this new normal doing something that to me right now feels incredibly natural. This is something that I do literally every day of the week these days, as I get into a rectangle and I talk about things and I converse with others and I try and work out problems with them. And that takes a whole variety of different skills, like you said, that skills that we haven't actually ourselves practiced and skills that we certainly haven't imparted onto the next generation of learners, or in Selma's case, the current generation of learners.
What do you think will stick in the future? The kinds of changes that have been made? I mean, I know some of it obviously we won't need anymore, but some of it probably will stick, right? So what do you think?
Yeah, so if we're talking about like design for learning, especially, there are people who are going to benefit from the technology and from the social steps we've taken to school during this time. I have in 2018, 2019, I had a few students that had to leave school for health reasons, and they lost a lot of school time, learning time, growth time, just because of a medical situation. Those students are going to increasingly have more opportunities to participate throughout those situations if they can't physically be there. I know at least my county has a virtual academy that they're working on for next year, which I think is initially created to eliminate the hybrid model, that you can sign up for a semester or you can sign up for the year. And while you still have a home school in the county, you are connecting virtually to a virtual class that is virtual every day. You may have learners from other schools, and you can still participate in sports and clubs and things at your home school if you so choose. But it's a really like huge opportunity to kind of explore this. And I'll tell you what I really, really want to see is, now that we're practicing these spaces, now that we're figuring out how to do this as a society, I want to see more education programs that are truly focused on digital citizenship. And I think this is a great opportunity to teach kids how to exist both in a in-person physical space, but also a virtual space. and there are a lot of different directions that can go, but it's almost like learning a language. You're not going to really truly learn how to do it until you need to, until you put yourself in an immersive environment. Oh yes, sorry.
Well, I just wanted to briefly talk about my English classes because a lot of my classes actually never went online. So, and there are a number of reasons for that. So we had to cancel pretty much all of our classes, all our regular classes in the first lockdown in March 2020. And for the majority of the past year, traditional classroom teaching hasn't been possible. And there were some classes that almost immediately went online, but for many classes that didn't work out. And there's really a number of reasons for that. And one is that our classes often run over many, many years. So you might have a group of students who have studied English together for, I don't know, 10 years. That they might have started out on the A1 very basic level, and now they're maybe B1 or B2 students. And they often take away much more from an English class than just language acquisition. I mean, they get together every week to study English, but they also have a coffee afterwards, and they and over time students become close friends. And really, for some of those people, getting together once a week might be sort of the highlight of their week, right? And students do value these sort of personal connections a lot. So I really have classes that have been meeting for 20 years with, you know, more or less the same group of people. And for them, what's really important is this sort of opportunity to feel connected. And not all of this can really be transferred to an online scenario, online setting, at least not in the same way. And moreover, in a lot of our classes, our English classes, we have senior citizens who had never used a computer before, or, you know, or at least in March 2020 had no idea what Zoom or Skype even is. And it's really tricky to decide which classes to switch to an online format and which not, because, you know, it's easy if all the students and the teacher want to do so. And it's also kind of easy to make the decisions if neither the teacher nor the students want to. But in a lot of cases, what happens is that you have some students who would like to take part in an online class and are able to and have the technology or the access to the technology, but there might also be students who either don't have the skills or don't have the computer, or just are not willing or able to use a video conference tool, for example. So the risk is that if these classes then go online, that they leave behind students who are not able to join. And that the worst case scenario would be that we don't just lose them for the time being, but that they then fear that they missed out and that they missed too much material and that they're also not going to come back again in the future. So it's really tricky. And I mean, we had classes where basically sort of the whole class unilaterally then decided that they would just wait and sort of try to weather the storm and only get together when everybody could join and traditional classroom teaching would be possible again. And then maybe they do something else in between, but it's, yeah, I mean, but then on the other hand, we also have, you know, I spoke to an older lady the other day who said that she was so happy that she sort of, you know, I mean, it's what we call in German to jump into the cold water, right? Ins kalte Wasser springen. And that she loves her class and she's very comfortable now using Zoom. And well, that's also nice to hear, but that's not everybody. So it's not only with the kids. I'm just saying the kids are not the only group to think about, right?
Yeah. So it's really, one can have a lot of new ideas, because so in Germany, I was responsible for the travelers, families working on fairs and students attending more than 10 or 20 classes a year. So 5 years ago, the German school administration had no clue how to organize school for them. So now, it would be super easy. It doesn't cost so much to that a student who is with his family in Munich and he joins his school in Hamburg. So it's possible. Or to say, if you are with students in a cancer treatment, you can stay at home and you can join the classes. And I think a lot of schools have learned a lot, and I hope that school administration will organize and support all these new ideas. But the main is, like me, so like you, Doug, I'm also used working on in a rectangle in Zoom conference, but I very much prefer to teach in person and to see the person. And most of the students I'm talking to, they say we can learn much better when we are in school in person than in a. So there were only some who are very concentrated and very focused. Sometimes, but I have the feeling that they look into the screen and besides they watch soccer or play video games also. And there were, I think because learning is spending time together in person to see each other, to feel each other, but also there was a lot of possibilities with all these online models. And my agency, we are working with the German language advisors all over the world, and we are getting more and more used having Zoom conferences, for example, which we haven't before.
And I think sorry.
No, go ahead, Selma.
For a lot of our students, it's sort of the second best option now. And I think the situation went on for such a long time now that some people realize that, they'd much rather get together in person, but if they can't do that, then they're going to meet on. So, but if given the choice, I mean, most of them would probably prefer like a traditional classroom setting.
Yeah, suffice to say that this is really, it's opened up a lot of opportunities, but it's created a whole slew of problems, many of which we have yet to solve. And it's different problems based on different populations as well. Helmut, that's a whole special kind of detective work we have to do now when we see a black screen and we haven't gotten any work from someone, kind of figuring that situation out.
Yeah.
So I really like, Helmut, how you put it when you said every crisis is an opportunity. I think that's a really great way of seeing it. But what would you say, and this is a question for everybody, and then I think we should start wrapping up and looking at the questions in the Q&A box. So maybe this could be our final question is, what would you all say is the greatest educational challenge moving forward now, assuming that COVID is going to come to an end sooner, if not to an end, at least it's going to be under control because of vaccinations. What would you say is that one of the biggest challenges moving forward after this past year?
It will take years to close the gap in the learning, because so many students nearly lost 1 year of teaching. And and I think for some students it will be very hard to join school in person again if you are used to staying at home. And I think for vulnerable kids, sometimes with the risk of being bullied in school or something, so the challenge to come back to personal settings, it's huge. And yeah.
If I may, I would definitely mirror that to say that this is going to have an impact for a really long time. This is going to intellectually, academically, emotionally, this is going to be very hard on all of us moving forward. I would say that in the spirit of finding opportunity in crisis, I think this is kind of like a bittersweet part of this. I see a lot of public education in America having kind of a reckoning with its old structures, with things like testing, with things like what does a grade mean, what are grades important for. I've seen how school systems value, especially as a German teacher. I've seen how schools value different disciplines over other subjects. So, I mean, we've been told flat out sometimes that like students are to use our class time to study for core subjects that they can promote. And then again, that's another question. What is promotion from one grade to another? What does that mean for someone's development? I think the greatest challenge that we're going to face, other than the immediate needs of our students and our staff and our families, I think the greatest challenge is going to be seizing on that consideration for old structures. I think that we have exposed a lot of issues currently, and if it is done effectively, I think that we can actually build something that's better, that's more just for students, for teachers, for communities. But it's not going to be easy, and it's going to take a lot of stakeholders coming from a lot of different directions to tackle.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. Actually, I agree with all of it, and I mean, I think that I feel sometimes that we can't even begin to sort of understand the consequences that this crisis is going to have over the next decades. I mean, especially with regards to kids. I mean, what you talked about, Helmut, basically the disadvantages that some children are experiencing. I think it's both. We're going to need analysis as to what has actually happened over this past year and probably a while to come, and then figure out a way how to address it and try to sort of make amends somehow. But I think it's going to be very hard.
Yeah, so thank you all of you. That's very, very interesting, insightful responses. If we have time, we have about 7 minutes left until 1 o'clock. So I'd like to look at some of these questions. Can you all see the questions, or am I the only one who sees the questions?
I can see.
I don't see them right now.
Okay, they're under the Q&A box.
So yeah, I can see.
Yeah,
them.
I need to. Okay, but then I can't see you. So okay, all right. Well, because I'm on an iPad. Okay, but it's okay.
Yeah, so the first question is for Selma. It reads, you mentioned how the VHS was publicly funded, allowing your classes to be affordable, if not free. Did the pandemic affect the price of classes at all with the reallocation of money to deal with COVID?
No, I mean, it didn't. And that's, and I think the reason, and I'm really just speaking for myself here, I think one of the reasons that prices didn't go up is because we're publicly funded, and because our work as a Volkshochschule is sort of an integral, I don't even know how to say it. It's part of a broader system, and our task is to provide this kind of education. And we need it more now than ever before, I think. And that's the reason why at least our prices didn't go up.
Right.
Yeah, it would seem like that would kind of betray the mission of it entirely.
It would betray the mission, yeah. So.
Good point. The second question, I think, is just for anybody. It reads, I hear that homeschooling is less common and less socially acceptable in Germany. Is this true? And will this change because of the new experience with virtual homeschooling?
I think it's true. And I think we have to keep in mind that homeschooling is something completely different in Germany. So in the US, you are allowed to homeschool for your kid. So it's not many parents do, but some do. And in Germany, it's strictly forbidden. And to educate your kid at home. So the idea of someone being at home, learning at home, is not as familiar and as normal as it is in the US. That's my guess. And I think a lot of parents and students are tired of learning remote, and their aim is to come back to in-person classes. That's my guess.
Helmut, to speak to that, with how common it is in the United States, I think it's around 3% last year. That was in the spring, at the beginning of the spring semester of, on average, American families were homeschooling, and that doubled in the fall.
Okay.
Can I come back to to the first question just real quick? Because I just want to say it took me a while to think about it, but I really appreciate the question, and I'd never thought about this, and it makes me actually appreciate even more what we have and how important that is. So just thanks for the question. It gave me something to think about.
Great. There's another question. How have adaptations been made for students with various disabilities, blindness, deafness, other learning disabilities? How have the new online teaching methods made, accommodations for these?
We've, at least in, public education, you have to have your 504s, your IEPs. These are things that are read, written well ahead of time. So, that system did not change for us so much as I thought it would, which actually is fairly consistent. I think everyone, especially after the spring semester last year, where many school systems kind of just threw up their hands and said, do what you can. And we did. This time around, we had a lot more time to look at specific cases. I have a student who actually does have a really lot of difficulty seeing. So the blindness part of this is something I've personally dealt with. Honestly, it's just about finding solutions that you can talk to your counselors about, that you can talk to the families about, and going case by case. In this student's case, all assignments that I gave the class were he has a totally different Chromebook setup. He has a laptop that's got like a touch screen that he can write on and things like that for spelling. And he got an alternate or differently typed assignment for everything that we did in the past 3 marking periods. He actually just came back to in-person learning this week, which was very exciting. And he was expressing to me how much easier it was, how fewer headaches he got, because his face has to be about this close to the screen for him to read 36-point font on his computer screen. So sometimes I get a little bit of a headache just from being this far from screen for the 7-8 hour school day. I can't even imagine what it's like to have my entire field of vision in that lighting. But that is to say, case by case.
Great. And we have one more question by Alexandra. Have U.S.-German virtual exchanges taken place between classrooms? And how will the pandemic affect the future of exchange?
Oh, good question, big topic. Some schools, we have the German American Partnership Program. A lot of schools and have partner schools between Germany and the US, and most schools could only join virtually. And I hope that school exchanges will be possible soon, but I'm afraid that we have longer that we want to.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm seeing, I think we've answered all of our questions. Would anyone like to say anything further, Douglas, Selma, or Helmut, or we can go ahead and close? It is 1 o'clock and I don't want to keep people past the allotted time, but if anyone wants to say anything that we didn't get to that you think is particularly important.
I just wanted to add something on the question of homeschooling, which is that I had to realize that it's a very different thing to teach your own kids, and it's definitely different from any other kind of teaching experience I've ever had. And it has increased my appreciation for what my kids' teachers do every day. I really have to say. But I've also heard from friends who are teachers that it's a very different story with their own kids, that they'd much rather teach 30 other kids than their own child. So
see, they know all your tricks.
Mhm.
That's the
Yeah,
difference.
exactly.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Well,
Okay,
thank you so much. Thank you, Helmut. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, Selma, so much for this very interesting conversation and for all your insights and thoughts. It's been great for me. I learned a lot. I hope our audience also learned a lot. Thank you again so much. Yeah, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the school year. And here's Marcel back.
Thank you. And please come back in 2 weeks when we have our last panel discussion, the new normal in economics. And we will have a discussion between the CEO of the German American Chamber of Commerce in New York and one of our very own economics professors here at the University of Mary Washington about the state of the US and German economic relations. Okay, thank you for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Have a great week.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to say to Selma, I'm probably the only one on this panel who actually has been to Wetter instead.
Really? You have
despite
visited
Selma,
Wetter?
I know where it is and I have been there.
Okay, that's great. Have you been, now my question, of course, is have you ever been to Witten or Herdecke?
That too, yes. But Wetter is the smallest one of those towns.
That's true. Okay. All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. You all did such a great job. I think it went so well, and we got good questions, and it was a good discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Are we offline now? Or?
No, there's still 5 in it.
Oh, no, but
Oh, okay.
Never off the clock.
But Deborah and Esther are from the collaboratory, so.
Yeah.
but
No,
most-
but it was really fun. Thank you. And it was very interesting to hear from all of you.
So,
Agreed.
Marcel, give me an orientation. The students who attended our conversation, they are students of German at different kind of colleges and universities.
Yeah, of course, yeah, and people from the general population as well. I mean, there are just people from the community that joined as well. Also, our professors, we had in the past, we had like people from our sociology department, things like that. So it's quite a
What are these challenges in the German departments now related to the COVID crisis? Are there any changes? Do you have programs closing or?
Well, not that we heard of, not clothing, but we have a lot of problems with, hiring adjuncts because, the budget is not there and, people have to take full teaching loads and things like that. So that is something definitely a problem. So but we hope that we get the numbers up again. So that's why we, got together with our German programs in Virginia to kind of, help each other out a bit, kind of with things.
Good idea. Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks. Wonderful to see you all. Okay, good. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye,
All
everybody.
right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Emma.